Well, hello there. My name is HW, and thank you so much for listening to the Tone Junkie Podcast. My friends, this is episode 77. My, how far we've come. This is, you might have seen the title. It's called That One Where HW Talks Politics. Don't worry. It's only sort of that. I'm not really going to talk politics, but it's Super Tuesday. I mean, I sort of am going to touch on some topics, but not partisan topics. I'm going to talk about the fact that no one knows what a caucus is, and Iowa can't figure out how to count, and how we have maybe the weirdest way of coming up with, just the stupidest way of coming up with who's going to be the president. I don't mean the last part where we all vote in a democratic election. I mean the part before that. I'll get into that in just a moment, but first, a word from our sponsors. Hey, what do you know? We're our own sponsor. Today's podcast is brought to you by the Tone Junkie Loaded Kemper, available exclusively at British Audio. Guys, the Tone Junkie HQ here is absolutely a mess. You can see it behind me if you're watching on the video version. It's torn apart. There's stuff everywhere, and it's because I'm taking over the whole basement, the whole downstairs part of the house. I told my kids, look, you don't need this giant room to play video games in. Right? You can just sit there and play video games just fine and let me use the rest of the space. They didn't respond because they were looking at their Nintendo Switches. So, usual day. In the news, back in other news, you may have seen on Instagram, I bought a guitar. I bought an original 1967 ES335. HW, I thought you didn't like Gibsons. I don't like today's Gibsons. HW, isn't that guitar very expensive? Isn't that guitar like millions of dollars? A 6335? Bursts are like $250,000. Yeah, I kind of thought that too until I started really looking around and I realized basically 67, 68, and 69 ES335s go for about 1/5 of what an early 60s model does. Even 65s and 66s, depending on the color and model and shape and everything, can go for a lot more money. But if you compare basically a 1963 335, like the one Clapton played in cream, to a later Bigsby model, which is what I got, a Bigsby model with not with dot inlays, with block inlays, you will pay 5 times, 4 to 6 probably if the condition's really good, 4 to 6 times the amount for the 63. And I mean, forget about it. You want to talk about a 1960, 335? I mean, even the dot inlay, the most plain one, like forget about it. I saw one in the store today for almost $30,000. But my guitar that I bought, truthfully, out the door was just over $5,000. Damn, HW. Driving that Tessie, spending $5,000 on a 335 after you just bought a vintage amp? What the heck? My friends, listen. Let me explain something to you. In Donald Trump's America, no, I'm kidding. Oh, that was a joke. Remember I said this was the political episode, but it's not really the political episode. I'm just trying to see who just jumped up. He said Trump! Or someone was like, yeah, he said Trump. Anyway. That's my imitation of people who feel two ways about one person. He said Trump. He said Trump. Cancel him. Yeah, he said Trump. Anyway. No, but listen. A certain American auto manufacturer, whom I'm a big fan of, has had quite the run in the stock market. And I needed to rebalance because they went up so fast that I needed to lock in some profits because when I bought my car, I knew that company was going to the moon. And so I didn't want to be a dummy and just buy a car that would make me just a customer, right? So I bought some of the stock too. And that has paid off very well. Because that stock shot way up, and even if it declines 20, 30% from where it is now, it's still way high up there compared to where it was. So Tesla's had its moment. Tesla's going to continue long-term to have its moments. But that was a real rally. That was where everyone, listen, there were so many bears in the market who were just saying all sorts of things about Tesla that didn't make any sense. And they were trying to, they were basically saying, as I understand it, the argument against Tesla, not in terms of the cars or anything, but against Tesla's valuation, what it used to be in the market when it was like 1/5 of what it was, that was, they were saying if you compare them to another auto manufacturer for the amount of market share they have, they're vastly overvalued. But the market is, this is an investing tip right here. The market is always slow to price innovation. It's actually one of the only things that everyday retail investors like you and I, if we're paying attention, can actually invest into. So you can't invest into some future earnings thing or some report. That's already in their price. If you know about it, other people have known about it way before you and they made moves. But the market is very slow to price in innovation. So when I was shopping for a car, I started doing a lot of research and I realized, oh my God, these cars are better than any car on the market. They test in the absolute safest category. There's a funny story, actually. Elon Musk got kind of in trouble from the Highway Safety Commission or something, the people who do the crash test dummy testings. He went out there and said, he tweeted this, "There's no car safer than the Model 3. He said it has these are two statements. He said, there's no car safer than the Model 3. It has the highest test rating of any car ever tested. Those were the two statements. Those statements are categorically true. The Highway Safety Commission or board or something, they jumped at him and they said, hey, you can't say that. You are implying an endorsement from us, from our tests. But they said, but our tests don't show that. Our tests put cars into categories, meaning we don't say which car is the safest and which is the second safest and the third safest. We just say these are the categories. And according to our tests, here's one category, another category, another category, and we place them into category based on how they did on multiple tests. And they said, Elon, you can't say that. You can't say no car is safer than the Model 3. Can't say that because that's not what it means. Other cars are in the same class as the Model 3, and we don't determine which cars in a particular class are safer or less safe than each other. We only place them in the class. So, you can't say the Model 3 is safer than every other car in the class. Elon Musk answers back, I didn't say that. I said no car is safer. I said just what you're saying, which is no car has been proven to be safer than this car. There's no car that's safer. You can't make the argument that there is a safer car. It's in the highest safety class. And then that just went away. Nobody talked about that anymore. But that was the kind of stuff like, they would run these articles and be like, Elon Musk gets in trouble on Twitter again. Elon Musk does this and that. And, recently there was an article, but we didn't have the article, back in October when it was probably the best time to invest. We didn't have the article, but it said that I think it was a Chinese company or somebody took apart a Tesla Model 3 and they basically they gave like a report to the auto industry and they basically said Tesla's expertise obviously lies in their ability to innovate and make great cars and blah blah blah. But they said however, something like it should be noted that although it's known that Tesla is a leader in software in the cars, we estimate, after we took apart the car, that they are a leader in hardware as well, and that the hardware, the technology in the Model 3 and in the current Model S and X, they estimated that other auto manufacturers were 8 to 9 years away from comparable hardware in the car. That is sensors, computers, automatic things, right? The drivetrain, the battery, the everything. They said, after taking apart the car, we believe Tesla's about 8 years ahead of the market. So I basically back then drove this car. I saw how they were delivering cars, and I'll tell you what I did because HW is a little old-fashioned. I remember buying my car, and when I bought my car, Tesla had just previously did very bad in their deliveries. They were way behind in deliveries, and so their earnings were very low. And I remember being at the dealership buying my car. And it's not even a dealership. You just go in. If you say, I want one of these cars, they'll just fill out the online form for you, like the one you can fill out. They just fill it out for you on Tesla.com, right? So it's not really a dealership. They weren't like trying to get me to buy anything. But what I remember walking out was how many different versions of the Model 3 I could look at. And they weren't display cars because the dealership actually only had about 3 or 4 display cars because they're actually showrooms. So they just have one car inside and like 2 or 3 out front. All the other cars in the parking lot, most of them were Teslas, but they were cars ready for delivery. So they were delivered to the showroom, to the dealership. And then from there, someone would get up in the morning, get one of the cars, drive it to the customer's house, drop it off, and then they lift back. They take a lift back. I thought it was so cool that they were like, yeah, if you buy one of these cars, we'll make it, we'll ship it to the dealership. You can pick it up at the dealership, or we're happy to just bring it to your house, which I thought was so cool. So literally, this guy is driving this brand new car. There's plastic all over it still. Pulls it into my driveway, pulls off all the plastic, gives me a little tutorial on like making sure I had the app on my phone, showing me a couple things. He said, have you driven one of these before? I said, yes, I test drove it. I said, I've watched a bunch of videos. He goes, okay, just sit in the driver's seat. And he's just said, do you know how to put in drive, reverse? He just made sure, that I was familiar with the controls because it's not using a gear shift on the start, on the right. It's up on the steering wheel. So it's just a little bit different, but it wasn't a test or anything. He was just there to answer questions. He started taking off all the plastic on the dash and everything. It's a brand new car. And I signed some papers, and he then said, all right. And then he asked me, like, how's your day going? Are you excited about the car? Do you have any trips planned or anything? Just started making small talk. And then at one point, he looked down at his phone and sort of interrupted me and said, I'm sorry, I have to run. My lift is here. And I realized he just drives new cars to people's houses, has them sign some papers. Then he calls a lift, and the lift takes him back to the dealership. And then he gets another car, and he goes. I asked him how many he did a day at that time. He said, oh, man, we're so busy. He said, we're so busy. He said, my goal is to do 7 of these in a day in about a 12-hour period. My goal is to do 7. He said, but 12 hours, I'm like at the dealership ready with the first car, and I go. And we try and do them 6 to 6. But sometimes we're calling customers and saying, can we deliver later? And he said, so sometimes I'm delivering as late as 8 or 9 o'clock. I thought, that's an interesting data point. He's working more than 12 hours a day to get these out. I also had heard that they were offering bonuses for customers who would help them, or for employees who were hitting their numbers and helping them deliver more cars. And then I had my epiphany moment. I didn't have the charger in my garage yet. See, I had to call. See, the charger you can buy online. It's a couple $100, and it's kind of, you can use a dryer plug or you can install their charger, right? So if you have someone come and put in a dryer plug, you got to pay like an electrician unless you have a dryer plug. Well, I didn't have one, and I needed the electricity brought to the other side of my garage. So they ran a little tube, and it went over the other side of my garage. And so they were going to charge me, $250 for that or something. And so I got that quote like over the phone because I told the guy the distance. He's like, I think it's going to be $250. Anyway, it ended up being like $300. But then I realized, well, you can buy a charger and actually charge a little faster. And I called the guy, is it more to install that? He said, no, it's like the same hookup process. So I bought this thing, but I had it at my house, but I didn't have it hooked up. So I couldn't charge my car at home. So I was driving my car, and every 3 days or so, 2 or 3 days, I would go to the dealership in the evening. And there was a lot of other cars there, a lot of other people charging at night. And a lot of people would have milkshakes from Sonic, or they'd have a burger in their hand, and they would go with their friends. And a lot of us people were just buying Model 3s at the time, and most of the people charging in the evening were in the exact same boat I was, which was they had bought a car, and their charger, they either were in a building that didn't have a charger, or they didn't have a charger yet, or they were deciding what charger to get, if they should do a dryer plug or what. So all of us had the ability to plug our car into like a wall outlet, which would give us 3 miles per hour of charge, which is nothing, right? I mean, it's enough that you could charge your car overnight and end up with, 30 miles of charge if you charge it for 10 hours. And maybe if you got a short commute, that'll get, you can basically maintain, but you're not really going to gain. If you deplete your car, you're not going to be able to get it back up. But so we were going, and these charges are fast. They would charge my car from 0 to like 80% in like 45 minutes. And then probably a little under 2 hours to get that last bit of charge. A lot of people don't know lithium batteries do not charge in a linear fashion. They, the first 80% of like your phone and stuff actually charges very quickly. It's the last bit. That's why I don't know if you ever notice your phone. It's sometimes you plug in your phone when it's like almost dead, and then you look back and it's like 50%. But plug in your phone when it's 75%. See how long it takes you to get full. It takes like the same amount of time. Anyway, so the cars are the same way. So it can charge 0 to 80 really fast, 0 to 80% of the battery really fast, right? In the last 20%. It's more taxing on the battery. That's what makes your phone battery die too. If you want your phone battery to last longer, pay attention to it. Just only charge it to like 75 or 80%. Your phone battery will last like 10 years. The problem is the batteries in the phones, they don't regulate themselves because the battery is meant to last about as long as the phone. But then, I mean, it's funny, they say that, but then Apple, is doing that thing where they're slowing down the processor, and they're saying it's because they don't want to deplete the batteries much because you only have so many cycles, right? You only have so many charge and depletes. And but really racks up what gets on those batteries too is charging them halfway, right? It's good to let the battery drain down and drain up and drain down and drain up. And it's good to go from 0 to 80 and stop, 0 to 75 and stop. That's less taxing to do that motion than to get the full charge on. Anyway, this isn't meant to be a battery podcast. What's going on is I was at the dealership with my dad, and I'm still like a super Tesla head at the moment. I'm like really into it. And I'm going, come on, get a Tesla, Dad, get a Tesla. And we go, and one of the things I noticed with him one night while we were there, because he was here like the second week I had the car, and it was about a week or two before the next earnings report was going to come out for Tesla. And the big thing was this: are they going to have a profitable quarter? Are they going to hit their numbers? And this was towards the end of this was as the last year, I guess. Are they going to have a profitable number? Are they going to have a profitable year? What's happening? Come on. What's going on? Are they going to hit their delivery numbers? Because if they hit their delivery numbers, they're going to look really good. But if they don't, it's going to show that this is a company that can make a nice car, but they can't get them into people's hands efficiently. And if they don't hit their delivery numbers, that also means they may have a demand problem. Now, Elon had been very outspoken. We do not have a demand problem. And then he started doing all these things. There were leaked emails about him going, we have to hit deliveries. We have to hit deliveries. Okay. I'm at the dealership and I look around and something hit me. I realized the only cars here, literally, the only cars here were 4 show cars, which you could not buy. One was an X, one was an S, and there were like 2 Model 3s. You probably could have bought the Model 3s. And there were no delivery cars in the parking lot, meaning the parking lot, which used to be full of cars that had been dropped off, on a Monday, and then they were going to be delivered to customers on a Tuesday, a Wednesday, and Thursday, and then the next truck would come and deliver them on a Friday. There were no cars in the lot. Nope, this is very Warren Buffett, guys. These are one of those things where I am going to toot my own horn about it because I was very proud of it. I was very proud that I was standing in a parking lot of a real Tesla dealership going, I know what the media's saying. I know I've heard people say they are going to hit it and they're not going to hit it. And what I can know is this. I'm standing at the Nashville showroom. There were a lot of cars here 3 months ago. There are no cars here today. And I just said, this is a company who's going to hit their numbers. This is a company who switched how they're delivering cars. And I bought. And then I made some money. And then the stock market got a little silly, so I had to lock in some profits so I could rebalance. And then bada bing, bada boom. There was a little cash left over, and I said, I actually got this advice from Michael Brill. Let's get back to the guitar thing, because I want to explain why I bought this too. Because it's really a lot of money. I don't think people should spend $5,000 on a guitar. I don't think you should do that. I don't think that's very responsible unless you really have 5,000 to get rid of. But Michael Britt basically told me recently, because I started, I played a bunch of his guitars. And I said, dude, Michael, I love so many of your guitars. And he said, sell the ones you like. And just keep getting ones until you love it. And then keep that. And I was like, oh, that is some wisdom, bro. That is some wisdom. So I'm in an interesting position too because of what I do for a living, right? I make this podcast. I make profiles. I'm about to change the IR game. I keep leaking that here. But trust me, you guys, what I'm working on is... Boo! Own Hammer, Celestian, Tone Junkie. That's going to be the sentence right there. That's not putting anybody down or anything. There's other people making IRs. I'm just determined to get the Tone Junkie name into the conversation, right? The way that I think we've been able to put the Tone Junkie name into the Kemper conversation, right? Do the very best stuff. Try to make the very best stuff you can. Be generous. Be just yourself. Be genuine. Just be HW. And don't quit. Keep going. Keep going, keep going, keep going. You had a favorite amp that you put out there? People didn't really buy it? No one talked about it? It's all right. Put out the next one. You put up a video? People didn't watch it? You thought it was going to do good? Someone left a comment like, I'm not watching your channel anymore because all you guys talk about is blah, blah, blah. Or, ugh, can you just blah, blah, blah? Or someone recently said that the Kemper show is still copying that pedal show. To which I was like, what? We changed the name. And I think they're talking about the intro. And I realize if you're not familiar with my content, me saying, well, hello there, my name is HW, that might seem like Mick here, Dan here, like maybe I'm still copying that or something. I mean, the first episode was meant to be a joke. But you just don't quit. You don't quit, man. You don't quit. Black belts are just white belts who didn't quit. Black belts are just white belts who didn't quit. And I realize that nobody is really leaning on the vintage stuff, and I am buying these amps with the intention of producing IRs that nobody has out there, of speakers and creating a way to access these sounds from the past. Anyway, let's get back to what I was saying about the thing. Here's the thing. When you make some money in the stock market, like I got lucky. I'm not a stock investor or something. I just really started talking about Tesla. I started talking about it on this podcast, started talking a bunch about it. And I was like, I'm going to, and then I heard Warren Buffett say something like, if you just buy the product, you're a customer. If you buy the stock, you're an owner. Be an owner. So I bought some Tesla stock and I did well on it. And I just wanted to lock in some profits. I still got some of that, but I'm not like trying to pick and choose companies. I got like a 401k and I put some money in Vanguard Admiral S&P funds. So I'm just going to get a steady return, the average of the total market. I'm not trying to be rich on stock investing because realistically, if you want to do that, you got to spend all day doing it. And I respect stuff too much to do it just a little bit and pretend that, I know it a lot. You know what I'm saying? You start to do something a little bit and all of a sudden you think like you're an expert at it. Then as time goes on, you realize that you don't know a lot and you gain knowledge under the guise or under the umbrella or under the understanding of you don't understand as much as you about this subject. This subject is infinitely vast, but you keep gaining knowledge, and then that's why you usually run into experts who have very humble views of themselves in light of their field. There's very few, usually when people go, I know everything about this, they're either super type A, they probably own a business and work for themselves or something, because that's like a thing. I mean, that's like something like a Steve Jobs would say, I know everything about this company, test me. You know what I mean? That's like that sort of thing, where they're sure of it. But, if you talk to someone who's like an expert in like physics, You know, they can literally they could talk for months at a time on physics. But they understand that when looking towards the complexity of physics and the world around them, they have very limited understanding because they understand that the discipline has very limited understanding, that the thing they're studying is infinitely complex. And they're smart enough to have gotten to the questions that can't be answered, right? So I'm not an expert in investing or anything. I just got a little bit of luck there and happened to be at a Tesla dealership and went, wait a minute, there's no cars here. Also, I love my car. I bet other people love these cars too. And I bet they're not here because they bought a bunch of them. I better go buy some Tesla stock at 180 something. That sounds good. So anyway, then, because of what I do for a living, this is my living, I can write off my guitars, right? So I made some money in the market, right? So I sold, and I was like, I'm going to pull some of this out. So I took some of it out, and then I went, well, now I got to pay taxes on this money I pulled out, right? I don't want to do that. I got it. I'll buy something for Tone Junkie so that I don't have to pay taxes on it. So that's kind of what I try to do. And I realized something too. Because this is the next little investing thing that I've been thinking of. Because I really have been thinking a lot about this stuff lately because investments are interesting to me. I've been looking at real estate and stuff, and everybody I know who has any money, has bought real estate, and all my family members who are like wealthy, they either own a business or they own real estate. And I guess that's really the only two ways to make a lot of money, right? I don't know. Do you know anyone who's really rich who doesn't own a business or doesn't own real estate, or who didn't get it from their parents who owned real estate or owned a business, right? Not that being rich is the end all be all goal. I don't feel that. I've been at times in my life where I've been really broke, like so broke that I basically spent all the money I had to buy a Mesa Lone Star combo, a Mesa Lone Star special. And then I got home and I put it in my 98 Toyota Corolla, and it died the next day. And I just didn't have a car, but I had an amp. You know what I mean? And my dad helped me fix it. But, the car was on the way out. And then we did fix it, and that car just kept going. It never died. And I ended up giving it away to a guy, and he had it for a long time too. But it had a head gasket problem, but it just never went out. Anyway. So anyway, here's my next thing. You got to stick with what you know, and I'm pretty well versed in old gear, especially as I've been looking a lot more into vintage amps and learning about stuff. And I realized you gotta, I heard this guy give this speech about wedge investing. This is going to come back to guitar. He gave this speech about wedge investing in the real estate market. And he basically said this. He said, look, if you live in a market where they're building a lot of single family homes, right? And my ears perked up because where I live, Nashville, they're building especially in the burbs, they're building a ton of single family homes. He said, he was in Los Angeles, and he said, no one is building 2-bedroom single-family homes. Nobody in Southern California is building these two-bedroom single-family homes. You can get a 2-bedroom condo. You can get a 2-bedroom townhouse. There's not a ton of those, but you can get 2-bedroom townhouses. Most of them are 3-bedroom. And nobody is building 2-bedroom houses because the demand is for 3 and 4-bedroom houses. So what he was doing was he said, so I look for the wedge. The wedge is on the cheaper than this end, right? Like on the cheaper end than this. Let's say in Southern California, a 2-bedroom a 2-bedroom house like that would go for $700,000. $650,000 or $700,000, and I know I'm using California numbers, so that's ridiculous to most people. But that's San Francisco was San Francisco's more expensive than that actually. There are In the San Francisco area and down to into Silicon Valley and in between and probably across the bay, I don't think there is a single family home under $900,000 anymore. Like it's about to be true that in Northern California, in the Bay Area, San Francisco and all around, there will be no single family homes for under $1 million. That will be the truth in the next couple of years, probably, unless there's like something big with the economy. We get like a black swan. Which, hey, coronavirus has been almost a black swan. Except yesterday and the day before happened, and the market just jumped back. So, no, I don't regret selling my Tesla stock, by the way. I did sell it after it dipped a little bit, but it was I just wanted to lock in some of it. Anyway, so here's this scenario here. He's saying that, okay, I'm going to buy in this wedge. This wedge is what houses on the market are 2-bedroom. Cheaper than this are townhouses and apartments and condos. More expensive than this are 3 and 4 bedroom houses. This is the little wedge I want. This price range, these scenarios, right? And look, there are 3-bedroom houses at those price points in a worse area, and there are luxury condos and stuff in the same price range. But I don't want those. I want the 2-bedroom single family home. Why? His theory was this: because it's a supply and demand economy, his theory was there is going to be, as demand grows, the relationship to supply will widen for 2-bedroom units, single family homes. He said his theory was this: there was always going to be people who wanted a single family home but only could afford or needed 2 bedrooms. And they were going to have to make a choice. So if you're in the market for a 2-bedroom, you're going to have to make this choice. Do I want to get the condo, the newer condo, but then I don't have a yard for my kids? Or maybe then I don't have a patio or so, whatever the perk is of the single family home over whatever that particular condo is. Or maybe I want space between me and my neighbors. I don't want a wall and then my neighbor because my kids are loud. So I don't want to be in a townhouse. His theory was these were going to do the best in terms of rental increases because there would be more demand on the rental market because 2 bedrooms are popular in the rental market and no one was making more of them. So he was buying something that was going to go up in value faster than everything else. So I've been really looking around lately with this idea of where is the undervalued stuff. And I've been following guitar long enough to remember when you could buy Bandmaster heads for like $500. And I remember when, and now that's like HW, everything was cheaper at one time. Okay, yes, that's true. But I also remember when Silverface stuff, even Drip Edge, 1967, 68, 69, even those Silverface circuits, like even the Drip Edge circuits, which are almost not different and which are kind of the most coveted Silverface circuits. I remember when those were like, you would buy those, the Silverface Drip Edge was always a little more expensive. But basically, people would buy those and then take it to a tech and say, can you blackface this? And then you would just blackface it, and then you go, there, now I've got a blackface, bassman. And it'd be like, and all the ads would say, 71 bassman, blackfaced to AA, or to AB163 spec. And that meant the tech undid all the changes and changed the components back to how it was in the original 64, 65, and 66 circuit of the blackface bassman. So the Silverface was just like, oh, they're not as desirable, just buy those. The other ones that are, okay, so that's one example, right? Another example was, I remember my buddy had a 79 Fender Strat. And I remember him telling me, I have an old Fender Strat. I'm going to get it worked on. I've had it forever, like since I was a teenager. I was like, I'm picturing that this guy's going to bring in like a 61 Sunburst. You know what I mean? Like a 59, in Fiesta Red. He brings in a 79 in like a mediocre sort of sunburst color. You know those light sunbursts they did It's like it's yellow to red, not the three-tone sunburst, like yellow to black. I forget what they call the yellow to red ones. He brings that in. You guys, this guitar had the big headstock. I remember when the big Fender headstock was a no-no. Like, you didn't want that. Ugh, that was gross. You guys, this thing weighed like a sack of bricks. It was like made of cement. It was so heavy. The neck sucked. He took out the pickups because he said they sounded bad, and they did. And he put some other pickups in it, and he played that guitar forever. Now, if someone said, I have a 79 Fender, I would be like, oh, do you know how much that's worth? Because they went from just an old guitar that no one really wanted to even like the 70s Gibson harmonica bridge SG is going up in value. So it's all of these later things that weren't quite the vintage thing. It's all these later years that all of it starts moving up. Now, a 79 Strat is still not that expensive, right? Of all the Strats, it's still viewed as like the factory's about to close in 83 or 86 or something, right? And then they're going to move to the new factory, so there's no custom shop or American-made guitars for like a year. 79, we get into the 80s, and people don't really care until they open it back up. So the 70s are late, like the early 70s. Obviously, a 71 is going to be more than, or 70 is going to be more than, because you're still in the Band of Gypsies era, stuff like that. But I've been thinking, where is the opportunity in the guitar market? Because my friends, there's this guy in Nashville who's buying up all this analog gear because he knows what's about to happen. He knows that all these old boards and everything are going to go up in value as time goes on. The market's going to get smaller. But, but actually there might be an enthusiast market that grows even larger, but we'll see. But for me, I started looking and I realized super reverbs and twin reverbs are so cheap. Like you can get a blackface, a real 65 or 66 super reverb for like under $1,000. They're really hard to sell. Like you cannot sell them very easily. Twins are kind of the same way, and it's because nobody wants these heavy amps. So I'm looking at all this Silverface stuff. There's a couple things. One, there's blackface stuff that is just really undervalued because of its size. And then there's, because all the players want deluxes and Princetons, right? All the players want deluxes and Princetons. So I'm really of the opinion that the larger Fender amps are going to be the ones that you're going to wish you bought right now. Because a twin should not cost half as much as a deluxe from the same year, but they do right now. A super reverb should not cost like a third of what a deluxe reverb cost. And even Princetons are getting so high. But super reverbs do cost that. So it's a very strange thing where I'm looking at these going, I think I'm going to wish I bought 5 super reverbs. Because I think what's going to happen is players are going to go completely digital. And it's going to be digital is what I take out of the house, not small amp is what I take out of the house. And once small amps are not the things being carried around, once we all kind of get to the point that most Kemper users are at, which is I take my Kemper out, but I have an amp at home I really like. Once that happens, dude, you're going to go for feel and headroom and the bulk of an amp. You're going to want the bigger amp because you're not going to be carrying it up and down the stairs anymore. All of a sudden, you're going to want the twin reverb for its tone. And you'll like the Princeton. The Princeton's going to be great, but you're going to go for that over. You're not going to go for the Princeton over the twin. Like you're going to consider the twin. And what that's going to do is push demand away from the small amps and into the larger amps. Because all of a sudden it's not a mobility issue. It's not a transportation issue. It's what do you want out of the tone. So I think supers and twins are really going to come back. They're not making any more of them. I think early Silverface stuff, which has been going up in value, is going to keep going up in value. But what I've been looking at, because I've just, sometimes I look at dream guitars, I look at a Burst, and I go, man, maybe one day I'll buy a Burst. I mean, I'd be so worried. You guys are they're like 200,000. I'll never buy a burst. I mean, like my net worth would have to be, if I was worth 10 million bucks, I'd buy a burst. You know what I mean? That would be, but I mean, that's still, wait, think about that for a minute. A burst would still be like 2.5% of your net worth. But that's okay. I mean, that's reasonable. That's very reasonable. You can put 2.5% of your net worth in like a hobby investment, and that burst is not going to go down in value. So I think that's fine. That's reasonable. I think if you were worth just a couple million bucks, I think you could buy a burst and you could say, look, I've got this thing insured. I keep it in my house. I baby it. I'm enjoying it and preserving it, and one day I'll sell it later, or I'll give it to my kids. It's part of my estate. As an alternative investment, I think that does make some sense. Like I could see how you justify that, and especially at those high levels of net worth and income, you're not hurting for money, right? So it's like, whatever. You could put a higher percentage, whatever. But you know what I'm saying? If your net worth is $100,000, right? Like you own a home, and like the home, like your equity in your house and all your savings and all your 401k and everything is $100,000. I'm not sure. I mean, I'd buy a $5,000 guitar. I would just be like, hey, you should keep, like, the more you save early on, right? But the other real wedge that I've noticed is the difference in value from a 67 335, like a 67, 68, 69, compared to like a 62 or 63 or 64 is like 5x. Like, so for example, I said this already. I may have said this. You can buy a 335, like I paid about $5,000 for this guitar. And one from just a couple years earlier, 63, is gonna be 20,000, 25,000. And depending on the model, it could be more. So I think what's interesting is, what is that going to do to later guitars? Now, I've already seen Gibson ES335s going up in value from the 70s. But what I think that means is, if you kind of picture like a graph, and it's like on the beginning end of the graph, it's like, okay, let's start at 1957, right? Right? What are those guitars worth? They're really high. And as you progress forward, the value comes down to the late 60s, right? Late 60s guitars come down a lot. Then 70s guitars go down even more. Then you start getting standard production stuff right now. What I think is going to happen is, not only does all of those guitars, not only does that whole line just move up in terms of dollars with inflation, but I think the slope actually of that line evens out a bit. Where I think instead of having a sharper decline in the late 60s, I think it's going to slope into a more gradual decline in the late 60s and a more gradual decline into the mid 70s. That's where I think the next sort of move is going to be. And I think that because we're in 2020 now, and when you pick up a guitar from 1970, it's 50 years old. A lot of people have in their head, like, it's this whole thing, and they go, it's really weird to think that 1990 is 30 years ago, especially when you realize that 1980 is only 20 years ago. Do you get it? Someone, like, this is the meme. It's really weird to think 1990 was 30 years ago, especially when you think about 1980, which was only 20 years ago. Like, my thinking gets stuck there too. I always think 1960s, that was about 40 years ago. Because for some reason, I'm like stuck in like 2000. You know what I mean? Like, we were right around 2000 for so long. It's like 1970s, that was 30 years ago. 1980s, that was 20 years ago. 1900, that was 100 years ago. No, the 1920s. The stock market crash of 1920 was like 93 years ago, right? 27? So we're getting there as 100 years ago. So 1950 right now is not 50 years ago like I always think of it in my head. Oh, 50 years ago in the 50s. No, it's 70 years ago. Ah! World War II, 70 years ago now. They used to go, World War II was not that long ago. And now it's to the point it's like, there's pretty much no one alive who fought in World War II. Now, I shouldn't say that. I mean, I don't mean in the occupation after, right? But like the guys who stormed Iwo Jima, right? There's very few of them alive because they're 47. What are they today? Well, no, they're in their mid 70s. Okay, they're there. I'm sorry, I did my math wrong. I was thinking they had to be in their 90s. No, they're fine. They're in their 70s. Wait, is that right? Yeah, no, because you weren't born then. You had to be about 20 years old by that time, right? So you had to be about 20 years old. You had to be born in like 26 to be around in 47, right? 45. You had to be like 19, right? You'd be 19. Anyway, my math is terrible. Look, last time I did some crazy math on the podcast. I got to stop doing math off the top of my head. Anyway, the point is this. I think that there's some wedges in blackface Fender amps. And so because of that, I have a twin reverb that's not worth a lot of money. And I'm sort of looking at it going like, well, you are worth like $1,400. I could sell you and get $1,400. Or I could sort of like guess that you're at your low. You're not going to be less than $1,400 in the future. So I've got some money. I've got an emergency fund, and then I've got my, some money that's just like in my bank. And I got a 401k and blah, blah, blah. But then it makes me go, well, I don't need that $1,400 today. Like it would just sit in the bank. So I'm just going to leave it in that twin, and I'm going to watch. And look, maybe in the future the market just starts going the opposite, or maybe I need some cash and I free up the twin, or maybe I just go, I really would like to get something else. I'd rather get some other piece of gear that I want, and I don't want to go out of my pocket to get it, so I'll sell that twin. So I think those wedges exist, and I think right now it's a late, it's a Gibson 335 late 60s, and I'm not just going to buy one. I think over the coming years I'm going to focus on buying some more gear where I think there's opportunity for appreciation. Because I realized something too when I was in the store. I just started talking to this guy from Toronto. He's a session player from Toronto. I didn't catch his name. He was playing some guitars and we started talking. He said, "What do you think of that guitar?" I said, "Bro, this is an incredible guitar. Play it." And he played it and he was like, "Wow, this is really nice. I really like this." He said, "How much is it?" I said, "Well, they want 58. But I'm going to get it for less. I'm going to get him to give it to me." Because, pro tip, Rumble Seat Music in Nashville values customers. They actually, from their sticker price, will give you a pretty good deal. And all I did was ask. I said, "I like this guitar, but what's your best price?" And they came back to me with a price that I actually thought was better. They came back to me with the tag said 58 plus tax. They came out just over $5,000 with tax included. And I went, "Oh, you guys just brought this down like almost $1,000. That's cool." I didn't even bargain really hard. So, anyway, but I've been in there a couple times and I've asked them about very specific about very specific amps, and they haven't had them. And I'm on a little list where it's like, hey, if you run into this or this, I'd really love to look at it and check it out. So I think they know that I'm looking for some specific stuff, and so they know I'm in the vintage market. So, but they value relationships there. They value customers, and they're trying to, they want a crop of customers that's going to keep coming back to them, right, for vintage stuff. And they want a group of people they can call and say, "Hey, I got this in. Are you interested at all?" So I look at this guitar and I go, honestly, when I buy a Sir, I feel like I'm spending $2,000. But And that's the type of thing where it's like I have some guitars, I don't need any more guitars. And the Sir at $2,000 is really a good value to me because I think they're on par with some of the best instruments out there. And I don't worry about dinging that thing. I don't really worry about my JM Pro getting stolen because if it gets stolen, that will suck, but I'll get another JM Pro. It's not priceless, right? I mean, it would suck. I would be out the money. But I actually think my homeowner's insurance covers theft as long as it happened from my car. So I might just say it happened from my car. No, but you know what I'm saying. I mean, I shouldn't talk about insurance fraud on this podcast. The Tone Junkie Podcast, now covering vintage gear and insurance fraud. Anyway, the point is, I think if you buy an old guitar like this, and this is kind of how I'm looking at the Bandmaster and about this Vox. I'm looking at it kind of like in this in-between phase where I'm really just analyzing it going, all right, I've got some money held up in these vintage amps. And as this is my job now, this is my business, I need to go and acquire these vintage amps because I've tried renting and I've tried stuff. People with vintage amps they're not trying to lend you something so you can break it. That's the truth, right? So it's like if I want to do a Fender Harvard, which is what I'm looking at right now, I have to sort of get one and get one in good. It doesn't need to be good cosmetic shape. Like that's where I can buy cheap. I don't need museum pieces. I don't even need pieces that are untouched. They can have cap jobs as long as the cap jobs were good and as long as I can see quality components on the inside because cap jobs need to be done. But sometimes museum quality pieces, collectors will leave them original even though the amp doesn't sound right because they're not going to turn them very loud. And if you don't put a lot of voltage through, the caps that are leaking the voltage, they will eventually leak and take out the output transformer. Or, the amp can get to the point where you can blow the output transformer. You will do damage to the amp. But there's a lot of collectors who value leaving something completely original, even though if you got a scope out and measured, you'd realize this circuit is not functioning properly. These caps are leaking. They're basically going, no, this is for my collection. Like, here, you can turn it on and play it, but don't turn it up very loud. And they know that by not really taking it to town, they're not going to blow that transformer. And it's really, at that point, it's a museum piece. It's a collection, right? It's a piece of history. It's not, a player's amp by any stretch. So, does that make it bad or something? No, not at all. It doesn't make it bad. But it's not what I need to get for Tone Junkie. I need to get things sounding really good, and so I can't have a bunch of caps leaking, you know what I mean? Because then it's going to mess with the sound of the amp and everything. So I say all that to say this. Some gear I view as an investment, and I view myself in this moment in time as a curator of tone. And I actually believe I have a bit of a mission. I believe that for me, Profile the World has become something where I realize there's like a tone out there that you're not going to hear because they're rare and demand has gotten so high for vintage stuff. There's collectors and we're at the point where things cost absurd amounts and players aren't going to hear that tone. And look, you can buy a Helix and they say this is what an AC30 sounds like, and maybe it does. But it's not what every AC30 sounds like. And it's not what this AC30 sounds like through this speaker, through this. And they, like some of that capability's there. But if we don't capture them, what will the next generation of guitar players have to inform them? If these pieces just sit in a collection and we don't change the caps and then we turn them on every now and then, they don't sound the same because they weren't maintained, then we lose those sounds. We lose them to history. And so for me, whether it's capturing amps on the Kemper or capture technology on, the Neural DSP, Quad Cortex, or capturing IRs, which is something I've really been doing the last couple of days. I've really been focusing on capturing all these vintage speakers. If we don't do that, I think we really are doing the tone world a disservice. I think with this wonderful capability in front of you, like, you should be able to play these old sounds that you can't get your hands on anymore. And not everyone lives where I live in Nashville, where all the shops are incredible. I listen, I could go to Carter's or Rumble Seat or whatever, and I can walk in and there are 10, $30,000 guitars. And there's a couple $50,000. There are 1950s original Fenders with original cases with blah, 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 blah. It's all there. You know what I mean? So, like, I have to capture it. If I don't, the sound doesn't go on. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to lose these sounds. We're going to have people who just played Celestian blues and they don't really have a good version of a blue. They have what someone said a blue sounds like. But I've given you 15 packs with blues, and you can play it next to another speaker and across 15 different amps. You will, if you play those, you will get it. That's what a blue does. That's what a blue does with a Voxy circuit. That's what a blue does with a Fendery circuit. That's what a blue does with everything. And yeah, I feel like the keeper of a vault, a tonal vault. And I can't keep all the pieces, you know? I don't think I can keep the Bandmaster. It's too much money. Yeah, but maybe it goes up in value. I don't know. I can't keep all the amps, you know? I have amps coming. I mean, I'd really love to keep this AC-10 forever. I probably will. Because that's a rare amp and you don't see a lot of them. But if I don't capture them, who will? Maybe Michael Brett. I don't know why that's so funny. So it's a bit of a thing. It's a bit of a thing, you know. And I feel like I'm on a journey to really profile and capture the world. And I feel like I'm on a journey to tell the story of some of these old pieces of gear and give the sound new life in the digital world, and give it new life on a Sunday morning and a Friday night, and in an easy to plug ability. And that's really why I want to get into more IRs too. That's why I'm doubling down on IRs now, because I think IRs they're not going anywhere. I called it. 2020 is the year of the IR, and 2020 is the year of the Tone Junkie IR, I think. I have produced some of the most incredible IRs that I've ever encountered, because I have been doing it nonstop until I've gotten to something that just sounds great. I have gotten the Fender models on the Helix to sound as good as my Kemper by pairing it with the correct speaker, by really using the mic choice, you know, to my advantage and really getting variation. And I'm just excited to show it to everybody. And yeah, a lot of people have been asking me to do more Helix stuff. I'm not going to do more Helix stuff. I don't want to do Helix patches. I'm going to actually do Helix patches just so people can see what the IRs sound like, and then I'm just going to give them away. I don't want to, you know, I'm going to worship tutorials and Troy and, you know, it looks like David Hislop's going to do some Helix stuff. I'm going to let those guys do the worshipy stuff on the Helix. I'm just going to create some incredible IRs and capture all of these years of vintage sound. My goal is to just take a Jensen P10R. You know, I have a reconed version and I have an all original version, and I'm going to capture that speaker in both versions because one's a little warmer than the other. I think they're beautiful speakers. They're absolutely incredible for that tweedy sound. They also sound great with blackface stuff. Early blackface stuff came with a lot of that stuff. I have a 12-inch Jensen P12Q in the Fender Deluxe Reverb. I think that sounds incredible. I've got an original pair of Utah speakers that are in a 66 Pro Reverb. I think that's an incredible sound. I have a set of Concert Series Jensens, the bigger magnets, and they sound heavenly. They're a darker speaker, but they're a full speaker, and they pair so beautifully with something like a twin reverb. It brings so much heft and weight to the sound. It doesn't make it dark or dirty or anything. It just brings heft to this very clean circuit that has all the highs in the world. And right there, that is that what I just showed you, the 10s, the 12s of the Alnico vintage stuff from the 50s and 60s, an Alnico Jensen 12, the Utahs, and the Jensen concerts. Gosh, the only thing I'd be missing there is the JBLs, which I'll get to. But that right there is that is all the classic American speakers from the 1950s and 60s. That's all of them, folks. And I've almost got them all. And I'm going to profile them all. Because we're trying to profile the world over here. I'm going to capture them all. I'm going to capture the world, too. I'm going to capture them in IR form. And then we've got the Vox. We've got the British side of the pond. Oh, I'm hinting at what's coming. Because look, and then we got the other side. Stu G 62 Blues being completely redone. The old ones are going to be in there in a legacy folder, but I'm adopting a new sort of way to release these IRs in the sense that I want a little more variety without going crazy. I think you need 3 speaker positions. You need bright to dark. You need bright to warm. So there should be a 12157 in the brightest spot, little warmer, little warmer. Still those microphones, still that speaker, but I want to give you 3 variations so you can match it really the way you want it. We've got Stu G 62 Blues that are being redone in that way. Like I said, they'll still be in the legacy folder, the old ones that everybody loves because they're fantastic IRs. I just want to provide more variety around them. So I want to create a bright, like those might be the brightest version, and then I need 2 more warmer ones, or that might be the middle one. I might make a brighter one and a darker one. So you just have choice. Do I want a little brighter, a little darker? There we go. And then I got some 66. I have a 66 Vox AC30 that's going to be coming, and it has Celestian silvers, some silvers, and they're going to be great. They're going to be some awesome speakers, and then I have these 10-inch silvers, which are incredible sounding in that little amp. Celestian blackbacks. We're going to get some old Celestian green. We're going to get some old pre-Rolla Celestians, and we're going to do it right. And we're going to cover American sounds. We're going to cover British sounds. We're going to do it all. Now, I said this was the political episode, so let me get to it. And let me just say this. By the time this comes out, you will probably know who won Super Tuesday. And that's good. I'm glad. But this might even come out the day after Super Tuesday. It might even come out on a Wednesday. But man, I can't, look, this is my complaint about politics at the moment. I want to just point out a very specific instance. Nobody knows what's going on, and it's a pony show. I want to give you a really good example. We are trying to determine who is going to run from the 2 major parties for the president, to be the president of the United States. Donald Trump is going to easily push out Bill Weld. Bill Weld has been a lifelong Republican judge and stuff, and he ran as Gary Johnson's vice president, a couple years ago. William Weld is what he goes by. Bill Weld, William Weld. He is going to, he's going to get some delegates, and it's just going to show that some people don't like Donald Trump or something. But Donald Trump's going to be he's the incumbent president. They never kick out the incumbent president in the party. So then you've got a bunch of Democrats going at this, trying to go, okay, who's going to run against him? And here's what I can't believe. I can't believe we still let states like Iowa be the first to go. They need to be punished in some way. Now, let me explain. I don't know if you guys remember, but Iowa miscounted the votes in 2012 also. And they said who the winner was, and then when they did the recount, they came back and changed the winner. But the thing is, the night that the voting happens, all the candidates leave and go to New Hampshire because that primary is only a little bit away, is only like a couple days after. And the whole thing is about momentum. So we have this state, Iowa, that's like, we're so proud of the Iowa caucus. But every single year, a bunch of these yahoos get together in a high school gym, and not one of them even knows what they're supposed to do, because every year they try to do these "what is a caucus" video, and they never explain what a caucus is. I do not believe anyone in Iowa knows what a caucus is. I don't know what a caucus is. I've looked it up, and I looked on a bunch of YouTube videos, and there's just a bunch of people, they kind of tell you a bit about the process, and they say it works different ways in different places and different rules. And when I hear stuff like that, I go, nobody knows what's happening. No. Wait, what? How are we picking? Karen rented the high school gym on behalf of the Democratic Party. And wait. They put taped lines on the floor of the high school gymnasium? Okay. And they do what then? They call out an issue that's important. They speak and everyone listens, and then they move to different spots and they debate. First of all, listen to me. Nobody is showing up to the Iowa caucus and actually hasn't made up their mind yet. This is just a weird, and it's a hard word to spell, okay? So just stop it. We can't get a system where we can count the votes. So here's what really gets me about this time. You're probably following, but let me just tell the story, okay? There's a guy named Bernie Sanders who brushes his hair with a balloon. I mean, every time you see the guy, he looks like a more portly version of like Doc from Back to the Future. And Bernie's not a portly guy, really. He's just shorter. But his hair is always insane. It's always crazy. I'm like, here's what gets me about this. This year, Bernie didn't want to get screwed because there's been some stuff in the past with Hillary and whatnot. Anyway, let's not talk about that. But the Bernie campaign organized that there would be someone at every caucus location in Iowa to make sure there was no funny business. And then this app went wrong. And I'm going, you organized people to go to like the dozens of counties that are in Iowa, but you don't have a hairbrush? He just always, maybe you're laughing or maybe you're upset. I'm just saying, guys, this is a real thing. Most people who go to a nice restaurant, who go to a funeral, a wedding, anything of any real importance, they usually do something to their hair. You guys, this man is running for president, and habitually, he is showing up at events, speeches, all these places, just with absolute disregard to what is happening on his head. Now, I don't fault him, meaning I don't think that speaks to his positions or anything. I'm just saying it's a bit strange. Okay. Next point I'd like to make. But the thing is, nobody calls that out. If you call that out and you go, why is Bernie Sanders' hair always messed up? It's like, well, you just focus on the issues. And it's like, wait. I just want to point out that in general, people we respect are relatively well kept. Well kempt. So I really am a little bit confused. Anyway. I mean, look, Donald Trump's hair is like always blowing in the wind, and he's got this weird comb over. But it's very obvious he's trying to hide it, right? And listen, before anyone goes on this thing, well, that's the difference between Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is an honest man who cares about the people more than his hair. No, that's strange. It's strange. I care about my kids more than my hair. And I put on a hat or brush my hair. I mean, it's, you know what I mean? Okay, let's get off that. Okay, So you've got this race going on, and it's all about momentum early on, right? And so all these candidates, these who have like the least name recognition, right? Like not Joe Biden. Everyone knows Joe Biden. He was vice president, right? Hillary Clinton, when she was running, she had a ton of name recognition. They don't care as much about the early states. They're going and making sure they got a good, solid strategy in all the states. Really, they're playing for Super Tuesday. They play for some of the early states. They need to show up. But what happens is the guys who have small campaigns, they have only one hope. They got to break out. They got to win Iowa or win New Hampshire or win South Carolina. There's one other one, I think. Win Nevada. They got to win an early state, because if they win an early state, their name's all over the media. People talk about them. So there's this guy, Mayor Pete. His name is Pete Buttigieg. Is that his name? Buttigieg? I don't know. That's another thing. I think he dropped out by now, but I asked a buddy of mine, I said, this country is not going to learn to say his name. I think it's Buttigieg. I don't know. But I think what would have been really funny is if he had become president and we were forced to call him President Mayor Pete. Because you guys, 75% of the times I heard his name, it was just Mayor Pete or Pete. So I wondered if we were going to call him President Pete. I think we would have. I think that's what we would have landed on, President Pete. But President Mayor Pete would have been cool. So here's what happens in Iowa again after they did the same thing in 2012. They called a winner, and then days later when no one's paying attention, they go, oh, sorry, actually somebody else won. So they did it back then. They said Bachmann won, and then they recounted in 2012, and Ron Paul actually won. He actually won more delegates. He didn't get more votes. But nobody talked about it. It was like 4 weeks later, right? It didn't matter anymore. What's weird is Mayor Pete dropped out of this race. He dropped out less than 1 week after Iowa said, oops, our bad, actually Pete won. Not Bernie. Now, Bernie had so my only point is this, is like, it's a race in which it's all about momentum in these first 4 states, right? That's all it is. It's not, they don't actually care about the delegates because those 4 states have so few delegates. It doesn't matter if you get ahead. In fact, Iowa has not, I think, in 4 cycles or something, or I'm sorry, Iowa has not in I think it's been the last, I can't remember. It was something like 5 or 6 cycles. Iowa has not picked the president. Like if you win Iowa, you're not going to be president. But does anyone else see a problem with like making a system where we go, hey, we want to go first because we want to be a state who gives people momentum and who really has a big, strong voice. And every year you miscount and you literally call the contest for the wrong person. And then time goes by. The momentum goes to someone who didn't win. And then you come out and go, hey guys, sorry, it's 4 weeks later and we counted the vote. Or it's 2 weeks later and we counted the vote. And that guy's already on the ropes and then he drops out. It's like, this isn't really a contest. This is just some sort of like weird circusy thing. Right about now, even at the time I'm recording this, it's 5 p.m. my time. They're probably calling some states. They're probably doing something. I'm a little bit interested to go check up on that. Because Super Tuesday is a big one. You thought we were getting through this with no yawns? You were wrong, my friend. Wrong! You were wrong. But I think we covered some good stuff. I think we solved the political issue. We brought the country together. We can all agree that Iowa is dumb. They don't know how to caucus or count. And they actually should, 100%, they should not be allowed. And by the way, it's not one party. In 2012, it was the Republican Party. In 2016, or right now, it is the, right now, they might have messed up too in 2016. I don't remember. But now in 2020, it's the Democrats. The problem is not either party. The problem is that nobody can figure out what a caucus is and how to do it. And we're not even sure if we're supposed to use it as how to caucus, like it's a verb. We caucused today. It just doesn't make sense. So we need to stop it. We need to just knock off this nonsense. It's just this weird thing. It's one step away from like wearing wigs and a black robe. You know what I mean? But wigs and a black robe, do you know why they wore that stuff? And those big collars? They wore that because they didn't shower and they put powder in their hair because their hair was greasy and wet looking. They put powder to make it look dry and they put these wigs on. And then those big collars were to stop like all the dead hair and stuff from going on your clothes. Like, man, people were gross. We need to let go of this whole caucusing idea. We're at best, we're messing it up half the time. Like, this should not be the way we pick the president. It just doesn't, it's not even good theater. You know, it's not even good television. Why don't we take all the presidential candidates and put them on like a Wipeout or something? You know, it doesn't have to be like that's what happens, but I want to see like Andrew Yang versus Bernie Sanders, you know, like going through the Wipeout course, you know that show where you jump on these like balloons and these like things, and if you fall off, you fall in the water, and then they overdub your voice. Anyway, so guitars are now investments. I convinced myself. Now I need to go convince my wife. And Kemper is king. HW is still trying to capture and profile the world. Politics are dumb. Iowa is really dumb. Caucusing, nobody know. Honestly, I need to take something back. Caucusing is not dumb. I don't know if it's dumb because I don't know what it is, but neither does Iowa. That, my friends, has been my political take. I think the highlights for me were nobody knows how to caucus, including Iowa, and Bernie Sanders brushes his hair with a balloon, because that is what it looks like. By the way, I just want to point something out. If you read any bias in what I was saying, you may be right, but you may be wrong, right? And we all come at things with our own thing. So if you just listen to me and I made like a Donald Trump joke and you think that means I like Donald Trump or I don't like Donald Trump, it doesn't mean that. If I just leaned on Bernie. If you think that means I don't like Bernie, I just think it is comical. His hair is comical. You know what I'm saying? You know, Trump is comical. I mean, right now we've got two major guys in these parties who just have really weird hair. You know what I mean? And I don't know what that means. I don't know. We should have a separate like straw poll where we just debate hairstyles. Like who is taking more attention away from the issues with their hair? Is it Bernie or Trump? You know what I mean? Also, who could have a more easy fix? Like we should get like if I had a TV show and there were all these floating heads and it was like next on the HW hour. If it was like, I would have an expert on, and it would be like Chaz, that guy from anyway, it'd be one of the hairstylists from like a reality TV show, and it would be like I would just be like, who has more potential with their hair? Like who could do more if you fixed it? Like if you got a hold of these guys, who could have the better hairstyle? Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump? And I'm not sure. Bernie's hair, when it goes out on the sides, is almost long enough that he could pull it back into like a ponytail, which makes me think, like, could he do like a man bun? Like, could Bernie like really win the middle with a man bun? I don't know. We'd have to see what the polls say. How are we polling in the Southeast with a man bun? It's low, but the Southwest loves it. Also, bros and TikTokers seem to love the man bun. Cool, run the man bun there. For the Southeast, just put a Bible in his hand. There we go. Okay, I'm going to end this. My name has been HW. Thank you so much for watching. You have been listening to episode 77 of the Tone Junkie podcast. Thanks so much. HW, out.